In that case, I call Jordan Street v. Reese Taylor. We'll get started.
Good morning, Your Honor. Good morning, Your Honor. Aisling Fitzpatrick for the plaintiff, Jordan Street. Along with me, I have my second seat, Ms. Carolyn McGuigan.
Good morning, Your Honor. Oh.
We are starting. Yeah. Sorry, interrupted by the coordinator here. Sorry, go ahead, Ms. Hobbs. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No problem. I feel like we're going to have quite a bit of that. But good morning, Your Honor. My name is Sarah Papantonio. Together with my co-counsel, Claire Washburn, we have the pleasure of representing the defendant in this case, Reese Taylor. Now, prior to proceeding, Your Honor, the defense has some preliminary matters that we'd like to take up with the court.
Okay. Let's kind of do this in order. Plaintiff, do you have any preliminary matters you'd like to address?
None at this time, Your Honor.
Okay. Then let's get to the kind of housekeeping matters for the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. You know, as we've already seen in the last few minutes, we're dealing with some new technology here. The nature of this jurisdiction is very unique. And with that comes some technological lags, some interruptions. So I offer that at any point, if the court fails to hear something that I've said, or if there's a lag in the technology, I offer that the court just simply raise their right hand for a few seconds as to notify me, and so I can go back and correct what you might have missed.
I will do my best to use that signal. It seems like a good idea. You bring up a good point. I've been asked to give all of you my cell phone number in case you get disconnected for some reason or have tech issues. This is for everybody on the call. So I'm going to read off my cell phone number real quick. Feel free to call that if you get disconnected and I don't notice it for some reason. Give me a call and I will pause everything, get you back on the call. The number is 214-493-9612.
Okay.
My phone is silenced, but in front of me. So if you do call, I should still see it. If I don't answer immediately for some reason, call me back on the second call. I'll get it for sure. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead with the rest of your pretrial matters.
Would Your Honor like a summary of this case?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
And additionally, Your Honor, we understand that in a normal court setting that we would ask the court to approach on objections. However, since some of us, are thousands of miles away and you can't necessarily approach in a virtual setting, we simply ask that we can approach constructively so that our arguments can be heard outside the presence of the witness.
That is fine.
Okay. And Your Honor, some evidence has been pre-admitted. Would you like to know which of that evidence has been pre-admitted?
I have a copy of the order right here. So I've got a list of exhibits that have been pre-admitted and the stipulations. So I'm going to go on that.
And then we just like to put the court on notice that given the unique nature of the scenario we're operating in, we're only calling one witness here today, meaning that a lot of testimony and evidence will be published by way of deposition and just by way of screen sharing. We just like to put the court on notice of that.
That's fine.
And with that, we are ready to proceed, Your Honor.
Okay. Do we have any kind of pretrial motions or anything for the plaintiff?
Your Honor, we had two pretrial motions, but we discussed the same with the defense counsel prior to this trial. It was related to Jesse Merriweather's testimony, and as such, we do not have any motions at this time. Those are it for the substantive motions, but we did also agree to admit two pieces of evidence. If Your Honor would like to hear which ones, we can direct you to that.
Okay, just so I am clear, what you're saying is the motion you have conferred with counsel or opposing counsel, and you'll have come to some kind of an agreement. Do you need to enter anything in relation to that?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, great. What exhibits have y'all agreed to admit pretrial?
Exhibit 2, Your Honor.
Okay.
As well as the toxicology report, Your Honor, which is exhibit 15.
15, so you have it fully admitted 15?
Yes, Your Honor.
Or you are requesting to do so. Okay. Anything else that you have agreed you'd like to have admitted?
Yes, Your Honor. Exhibit 14, the autopsy of Rory Street.
Very well. Anything else?
That's all, Your Honor.
Okay. Then exhibits 2, 14, and 15 are admitted in addition to the ones that have already been pre-admitted by prior order. But you're all fine keeping the same exhibit numbering on this exhibit list?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Makes it a lot easier for us.
Okay. Any other pretrial matters from the plaintiffs?
That's all, Your Honor.
Okay. Defense, do you have any pretrial matters in addition to the housekeeping matters you already brought up?
Your Honor, we are ready to proceed.
Very well. In that case, we will get going. Plaintiff, would you like to make an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor, the plaintiff would. A moment to just set up.
Go ahead.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
You're useless on the field, so I might as well run you until you pass out. Those were the defendant's words to Rory Street minutes before he collapsed on the soccer field and died. It didn't matter to the defendant that Rory was visibly pale, exhausted, unable to catch his breath, and struggling. You'll learn the defendant chose to ignore these signs and instead ordered his player to keep on going. The defendant, his soccer coach, the person who was meant to protect him, watched Rory collapse after being tackled again and again and again. You'll hear the defendant yanked Rory off the ground by his jersey instead of offering Rory water, a break, or any kind of support. The defendant watched Rory suffer, and then you'll hear the defendant watch Rory die. Rory Street died because of the defendant's drills and the defendant's decisions that prioritize discipline over safety and winning over health. Your Honor, I stand before you today representing the mother of Rory Street, a high school soccer player who died because of the defendant's negligence. As the coach of her son's soccer team, he had a duty to conduct a practice in a reasonable manner that protected the health and the safety of his players on the field. Instead, you'll learn today that Coach Taylor breached this duty by going against industry practices. Coach Taylor gave Rory no breaks that day. He provided Rory with inadequate supervision, and he ordered Rory to perform physically grueling drills which had been untested and were unsafe in such hot weather. These resulted in the death of my client's son and any hopes that he had of a future. Now you're going to hear about Rory Street today. You'll learn that he was the brightest star on this varsity soccer league that the defendant coached. He had scholarship offers from multiple colleges to play Division I soccer after he left high school. But Your Honor, Rory was a lot more than just a soccer player. He was a son, a brother, a friend, and really an 18-year-old kid with his whole future in front of him. You'll learn that instead of being mentored by his coach, he was bullied by a person twice his age. The defendant targeted him until he collapsed and died in the middle of the defendant's practice during one of the defendant's drills. Now you're going to hear today from an expert, Dr. McConaughey, who will tell you that Rory died on September 7th due to heat stroke and heat exhaustion. Now you're going to learn this was caused by the way the defendant chose to run his practices. He prioritized discipline over the health and safety of Rory Street. You're going to hear how Coach Taylor held practices when it was over 100 degrees outside without adequate supervision and without regular water breaks or shade from that scorching heat. And this was in violation of industry guidelines. Now you'll learn that after the defendant became enraged over what he perceived to be sloppy playing from Rory, the defendant subjected Rory to punishing soccer drills. First, he had Rory run the Burma Road, and you'll learn this was a drill designed to punish players, which involves the players running for 60 yards, sprinting, and then bear crawling back those 60 yards. And as the name suggests, bear crawling involves the players crawling on their hands and knees, much like an animal. Now, at this point, you'll hear how Mr. Street was visibly unwell. He was pale, he was out of breath, and he was struggling in that 100-degree weather. Now you'll learn that rather than stopping this, the defendant's response was to have Rory participate in a new drill, one that he invented that very day, one that he had never tried or tested before. The defendant ordered all the other players to line up and slide tackle Rory. Now you'll learn today that slide tackling in this case involved other players running up to Rory and sliding him to knock the ball away, repeatedly, until the coach said so. This in turn knocked Rory to the ground. You'll hear how these were painful and they were also unnecessary. You'll hear after the first tackle, Rory fell to the ground and was clearly in pain. He was struggling, and the defendant will admit this today. You'll hear the defendant's response to Rory's struggle was to walk over, and instead of offering water or giving him a break or medical attention, he yanked him by his jersey in order to make him continue with those slide tackles. A tackle, a fall, a tackle, a fall. Rory kept on hitting the ground and having to get back up until finally, you'll hear after 15 of these slide tackles in that 100-degree heat, Rory couldn't get back up. Instead, you'll hear how he began groaning, shaking, and seizing right there on the football ground before he passed out and he died from heat exhaustion. You'll learn the defendant is not taking responsibility for what happened on his soccer field to his player. And instead, he's blaming Rory by pointing to a nominal amount of cocaine that was found in his blood during the autopsy. However, you're going to hear from our expert today, a medical doctor, who will tell you that the cocaine didn't kill him. The heat did. The evidence will show that Rory died from heat stroke due to the defendant's negligence in the way that he conducted his soccer practices. You'll learn that he failed to provide Rory with adequate supervision, failed to provide him with breaks, and failed to provide him with water in that scorching sun, all while forcing him to perform grueling physical drills. Your Honor, the defendant's negligence in the way he conducted his soccer practices, ignoring guidelines, ignoring his responsibilities to his players, caused the death of my client's son. As such, at the end of today's trial, I ask that you deliver the only verdict consistent with justice and consistent with the facts in this case. I ask that you find the defendant liable for the death of Rory Street. Thank you.
Ms. Kessler, do you want to make an opening at this time?
Apologies, Your Honor. I didn't realize I was muted.
It's fine. Would you like me an opening this time?
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court. Counsel. The child is dead. No mother, no father should have to endure that kind of tragedy. And you see, the question that Ms. Street is going to be left with for her entire life is why? Why did this have to happen? And the interesting thing, Your Honor, is that in a matter of 2.5 hours and 2 witnesses, they're going to ask you to answer that question that Ms. Street is going to spend her entire life wondering. Why is Rory no longer with us? And what they're going to tell you is that it's because of Coach Taylor. It's got to be his fault. But the why in this case is so much more complicated than what they've told you. You see, it's the plaintiff that has the burden in this case. And the burden to show that Coach Taylor's negligence was the cause of Rory's death. They call it a burden for a reason, because it's heavy. And they're not going to be able to show you that here today. And that comes down to the basic fact is that no one saw this coming. Not a close friend, not a concerned mom, and not even Coach Taylor. And in order to understand that, we've got to go back to the fall of 2018. See, Rory, he's a star athlete. He's the superstar of the soccer team. When he walks down the hallways, students think he's got it all together. He's talented. He's a good student. He's a normal kid. That's on the surface level. See, what the evidence will show is that beneath the surface, the pressure's building. It's creating cracks in Rory's facade. As a student, as a player, as a teenage boy, he's struggling. And the evidence will show that in the weeks before his death, he just wanted to be a normal kid. He wanted to relax. He didn't even want to have to deal with soccer anymore. Because when it wasn't the weight of Coach Taylor asking him to run faster, to play harder, to be smarter, then it was his mother pushing him to get that college soccer scholarship, pushing him to go to college and then go to pros. So this is an 18-year-old kid with what feels like the weight of the world on his shoulders. And what you'll learn is that that pressure it built. And throughout this trial, you have to ask yourself, what does a teenage boy do when he feels like he has no control over his future? How does it affect his facade when he feels like even the day-to-day schedule is too much to handle? And the evidence is going to show that Rory turned to drugs, but no one saw it coming. Not a close friend, not a concerned mother, not Coach Taylor. You see, the plaintiff, they're going to put on Rory's friend, Mr. Saracen. He's going to tell you that they grew up together, they played soccer together, that these guys were thick as thieves, that they confided in each other. You see, Saracen knew how much pressure Rory was under. They talked about it regularly. And in the week before Rory passed away, he had told Saracen he didn't want to play soccer anymore. He just wished the season was over. Now, Saracen was the kind of friend that everyone would like to have. But he was still the kind of friend that it was never revealed what was happening under the surface of Rory's life. Because we're going to put on testimony to show that Saracen, Rory's best friend, had no idea, could never expect that Rory was the type of person who would seek drugs for comfort, the type of person who might experiment with cocaine. And at no point are we going to suggest that Rory is a bad kid or that he was a drug addict. In fact, there's no evidence to suggest that this was nothing but his first time trying this drug. But the fact is, the evidence will show is that his closest friend had no idea, could never expect this behavior from Rory. So if a best friend can't expect that, you have to ask yourself, how could Coach Taylor see this coming? And now, given the nature of the jurisdiction that we're in, you know, the need for these video chats, you're not going to have the opportunity to hear from Rory's mother, but you will be able to hear her deposition, the testimony she gave a while ago. And just like that close friend, you'll learn that the mother didn't see it coming either. She had no idea that he was looking to branch out to.
You cut out for a second there, counsel.
Cut out for a second. Okay. And you're going to hear from the mother. You're not going to hear from her personally, but we're going to publish her deposition from about a few months after this happened. And she's going to tell you through this deposition that she had no idea what was happening in Rory's life, no idea that he could have resorted to drugs for comfort. So if a close friend didn't see this happening, if a mother didn't see this happening, how could we expect Coach Taylor to understand what was happening in Rory's life? And now you've already been introduced to Coach Taylor. I mean, opposing counsel did have quite a bit to say. And there's going to be points in this trial where you simply don't like him. There's some things that he did on the day of practice that you might not agree with. And I understand that because some of it is hard to stomach. But the fact of this case, the evidence will show that this was not foreseeable. And that's because you're going to hear about how cocaine affects the body, especially in high heat like this. Now, there's no question it was a hot day. It was 105 degrees. But we're going to put on expert testimony that says heat exhaustion alone only results in death in about 3 to 5% of the cases. But when you mix this drug with that incredible heat, the risk to your health becomes fatal. And we're going to put on evidence from an expert witness that says that cocaine was one of the causes of Rory's death here today. So that's something that you have to consider, because we took on a burden here today too. And that was a burden to show that there was some comparative negligence in this case. And Your Honor, as you well know, it simply means that Coach Taylor might not be fully responsible. And I don't want that to seem like we were blaming Rory. We're absolutely not. Rory was an incredible kid who made one mistake, but that mistake had a fatal outcome. It contributed to his death. So you're going to be asked to look at that at the end of this trial. So I have to take you to September 7th, because this is the day that we lost Rory. You see, Rory goes to practice, but at this practice, something's off. He's missing passes. He's not running to balls. He's missing a couple of wide open shots. This is not something that we'd expect from Rory. It's not something that Coach Taylor would expect from Rory. In fact, Coach Taylor is going to tell you that this is his star player. He is an absolute superstar, a superhuman on the field. So for Coach Taylor to see his star player struggling, maybe talking back a little bit, it's odd. And so he does what coaches for years and years at Waco have done. He sends him to the Burma Road. And now you've got a little bit of a description of the Burma Road. But what it is basically, it's a founding principle of Waco's soccer teams. I mean, Coach Taylor ran the Burma Road 30 years ago. Rory's mother ran it 30 years ago as well. This is something that every soccer player at Waco High School has gone through in their season. Now, yes, it's difficult, it's tough, but it's a part of the conditioning that makes them better. And that's what Coach Taylor is going to tell you. What he's going to tell you is that what he saw from Rory wasn't a physical suffering. It wasn't a physical struggle. In fact, he's going to tell you that he thought it was just some attitude, that Rory just needed to be put in line. And like we said earlier, you might not like how he handled it. But again, what this case comes down to is, could Coach foresee that he would have died from this type of conditioning? Was this an outcome that was reasonably expected? And the answer you're going to find is simply no. So as you comb through all this evidence and testimony, I want you to ask yourself one question the whole time. If a mother couldn't see this coming, if a close friend couldn't see this coming, how can we expect Coach Taylor to? And at the end of this trial, we ask that you find Coach Taylor is not liable. Thank you.
Okay. Plaintiff, are you prepared to begin your case in chief?
We are, Your Honor.
Okay, let me get the timer set up here. I'm trying to keep a running tally of time, so if at any point you guys are concerned about your time, you can ask, but
Yes, Your Honor.
that may tax my mathematical abilities. Okay, go ahead and get started.
Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Aubrey Saracen to the stand.
Okay, Mr. Saracen, we're going to say you've been constructively sworn in.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
Good morning. Can you please introduce yourself to the court?
Hi, I'm Aubrey Saracen.
And where are you from, Mr. Saracen?
I'm from here in Waco,
How old are you?
18 years old.
And are you currently in school?
Yeah, I'm a senior at Waco High.
Have you figured out what you're doing after high school?
I'm going to be going to Rice University. I got a National Merit Scholarship, so I'm excited to be attending there next year.
Now, in high school, are you involved in any extracurricular activities?
Yeah, I was on the varsity soccer team for the last 4 years.
Is that something you enjoy doing?
Love it. It was my entire life. I loved playing soccer.
Now, I want to speak to you about your friend, Rory Street, and I know this may be difficult for you, so if at any point you want to take a break, you can just let me know, okay? Let's start. How did you meet Rory Street, or how did you know him?
I grew up with Rory. He was my best friend from an early age. We did pretty much everything together. and we played soccer together.
Did he also play soccer for Waco High?
Yes, he did. We were on the same team.
Now, who coached the two of you on the school team?
Coach Taylor.
And how long did the defendant, Coach Taylor, coach you for?
Our entire time there, so for the last 4 years.
How would you characterize him as a coach?
He was pretty successful. We won a lot, but he coached by he was really tough. He coached with intimidation, and he punished us if we didn't play well.
Now, we'll get to that in just a moment, but I want to direct you to a particular practice. Do you remember September 7th, 2018?
Of course. I'll never forget that day.
Why is that, Mrs. Saracen?
That was the day Rory died.
Now, we'll just get into that in a moment, but before that, I just want to set the scene for the court. Where were you the day that Rory died?
We were out on the practice field, and it was about over 100 degrees. It felt like it was like 105, 110, or 110. It was a blistering day that day.
Now, on this hot day, were you given any breaks by the coach during practice?
I can't say for certain. I don't remember. I don't think we were that day.
And now, can you tell us what, if anything, you remember about practice that day?
I got in trouble for something, and the coach had me running Burma Road that day, and coach was just extremely angry. He was yelling at Rory. He was not in a good mood that practice.
Now, I want to break those two things down. First, you mentioned Burma Road. Can you explain to the court what that is?
Yeah, that's a drill that Coach Taylor would have us run if we messed up in practice or did something wrong. It's where we'd sprint like 30 yards, and then we'd get a ball, dribble it another 30 yards, score on an open net, and then bear crawl all the way back those 60 yards.
What do you mean by bear crawl?
So that's where we'd be down on our hands and feet, and we'd be crawling like a bear all the way back 60 yards.
Now, you mentioned just a moment ago that Coach Taylor seemed angry that day. How did you know that?
He was screaming at the top of his lungs. He was screaming at Rory. He said something like, "You're useless, and might as well make you run until you pass out today." He was really giving it to Rory that day.
When he was yelling at Rory that he was useless and that he was going to make him run until he passed out, did he explain what he meant by that?
No.
And where were you when you heard him yelling at Rory?
I was running Burma Road, so I was about like 20 yards away, I would say.
Now, when you heard the defendant yelling at Rory, did you hear him offer Rory any breaks?
No.
Did you hear him offer Rory any water?
No.
Did you hear him ask if Rory was okay at all?
No, I didn't.
Now, after the defendant yelled at Rory, where did Rory go?
He came over to Burma Road with me and started running it.
Now, I want to talk to you a little bit more about the layout of the soccer field. Your Honor, permission to publish what's already in evidence as Exhibit 2.
You may.
Mr. Saracen, do you recognize what's on the screen in front of you?
I do.
And what is that?
That's our practice field.
Now, I just want to talk to you a little bit about the layout. I see two boxes here. Can you tell the court what is in the blue box?
So would just be our regular practice field. That's where the majority of our practice would be run.
And then to the right of that, what is in the red box?
That's where we run Burma Road.
On September 7th, after the defendant yelled at Rory, where were you and Rory located on this diagram?
We are in the middle of that red box.
And where was Coach Taylor during this time?
He was in the blue box still with the team conducting practice.
Now, you mentioned a few moments ago that it was quite hot that day. Are there any areas of shade on this field?
None whatsoever. There are no trees. You can see on this picture that there aren't any trees. We're just practicing in the full on in the sun.
Ms. McGuigan, you can take that down. Thank you. Now, I want to talk to you some more about when you and Rory were running Burma Road that day. Did the defendant ever come over to you while you were doing that drill?
No, it didn't.
Did anyone, a trainer, anyone come over to you at that time?
None. No one did.
Now, how was Rory doing while you were doing this drill?
He wasn't doing well. As soon as he came over, I would say he was struggling big time. Shortness of breath, just was unusually pale for him, and he was not looking well.
Did you ask him if he was okay?
I did, and usually Rory keeps to himself. He's a pretty tough kid and never likes to tell anybody if anything's wrong with him. But he said his chest was feeling kind of funny when I asked, and that was about it.
How did this make you feel?
I was worried. I mean, just like I said, the fact that he even said that he was feeling some kind of in some negative way had me thinking like he's not doing well. He's not in a good state of mind and physically.
At any point after this, did you see the defendant interact with Rory again that day?
Yes, I did. Pretty soon after Rory was running Burma Road with me, Coach started yelling at him again.
What was he yelling this time?
I mean, just various things like, "Oh, you think you're so special? You think you're, the hot shot? I'll show you how special you are. I'm gonna keep running you." Stuff that Coach usually yells.
Now, after the defendant yelled at Rory for a second time, what happened next?
Coach had Rory come back over to the practice area and had the rest of the entire team line up, and they started running a slide tackling drill with Rory.
Can you explain to the court what a slide tackle drill is?
Yeah, so this was when Rory would be dribbling a ball, and the entire team, one after another, would go and try to slide tackle and kick the ball away from Rory as he went down the field.
Does this form of tackling involve physical contact at all with the person dribbling the ball?
I mean, it shouldn't, but it inevitably does. The person dribbling will most often get knocked down and get hit by the person sliding into them.
And to be clear, during this drill that the defendant set up, who was dribbling the ball?
Rory.
Now, where were you standing at the time that Rory was doing the second drill, this slide tackling?
I was a little further back. Definitely not. I wasn't involved in the drill, but I was watching it happen.
Could you see Rory at the time?
Yes, I could.
And can you describe what he looked like at that point?
He looked worse, looked more exhausted, just pale, exhausted, tired, just clutching his chest, not looking well.
And where was the defendant standing when Rory was clutching his chest?
He was right there. He was right at along with the other players conducting the drill.
Was he closer to Rory than you were?
He was.
Now, you mentioned earlier that it was a very hot day. Was it still hot at the point that Rory was engaged in this second drill?
Yeah, it was still extremely hot.
At any point during the second drill, did you hear the defendant offer Rory a break?
No, I didn't.
Did you hear the defendant offer Rory some water?
I did not.
Did you hear him ask Rory if he was okay at all?
No.
Now, what happened once this slide tackle drill began?
I mean, immediately, the very first teammate that went and tackled Rory, Rory collapsed straight to the ground. Looked pretty bad. It just full weight down on the ground, and then Coach came over and grabbed him by his jersey and just pulled him right back up to get him to keep going.
So just to be clear, after Rory collapsed from the first slide tackle, what did the defendant do?
He walked over and he grabbed Rory by the jersey and pulled him onto his feet to continue the drill.
Now, how long did this slide tackling go on for?
The coach had Rory run it 15 times.
Have you ever seen this drill practiced before during practice?
Never. We would practice slide tackling sometimes during practice, but we never did this drill. We never did it on a single teammate.
Now, what happened after the 15th slide tackle?
Rory collapsed and he stayed on the ground. He couldn't get up. He was convulsing. It looked like he was having a seizure. I was so worried at that time.
At this point, with Rory on the ground having what appeared to be a seizure, what did the defendant do?
Nothing.
What was happening at this point in relation to Rory?
He just looked so awful. And I mean, the trainer came up, someone called 911, someone was trying to get an ambulance out to him. But then I just remembered seeing Rory just stop moving.
Thank you, Mr. Saracen. No further questions, Your Honor.
Very well. Anything from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Saracen. My name is Sarah Papantonio, and I represent Coach Taylor. So I have some questions for you.
Okay.
I want to first talk about your background in soccer. You've been playing soccer for quite a while.
Yeah.
Basically your whole life.
Yes.
And you've gotten pretty good at it, right?
Yeah.
So good you're on the varsity team.
Yes.
And in your words, you could even potentially walk on to a college team.
I think so.
So you've been playing at Waco High School for 4 years now.
Correct.
It's a good team, right?
Yes.
And as a soccer player with all this experience, you understand what goes into making a good team. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
It requires practice
Yes.
and discipline.
Yeah.
And we can agree, Coach Taylor, he was no stranger to discipline, right?
I agree to that.
So let's talk about what your soccer practices looked like at Waco for a minute. Now, soccer season starts at the end of the summer, right?
Yes.
End of the summer is hot,
Very hot. Yeah.
especially in Waco.
Yes.
But like you've been telling us, you've been playing soccer since you were a kid, so you're no stranger to hot weather,
Yeah.
right? We could say you were used to it.
As used to it as you can be.
Right. It never gets easier. Now, but in September of 2018, your team, they'd been practicing in that heat for about a month at that point.
Yeah.
And as far as you know, you hadn't had any problems with heat exhaustion prior to Rory's accident.
Yeah, that's correct.
Now, it's fair to say that these practices with Coach Taylor, they can be tough, right?
Very tough.
If you miss a pass, a tackle, you can get sent over to that Burma Road.
Yes.
And that's a drill where you have to run,
Yes.
right? You got to dribble, you got to shoot,
Yes.
and then you got to crawl back.
Yes, we do.
Now, this is a part of conditioning, right?
Yeah,
Because soccer, it's a 90-minute game,
it is.
right? And you're running the whole time.
Yeah.
Now, I want to talk about how this layout of practice happens, because Burma Road, it's not on the same field as the scrimmage or the practice, right?
Yeah.
I think you said it's about 40 yards away,
Yeah, 20 to 40.
right? And getting sent to Burma Road, it's not unique, right? Happens a lot.
Yeah.
In fact, Burma Road has been a part of this school for years,
Yeah, it's a tradition.
right? Coach Taylor did it.
Yes.
People before you did it.
Yeah.
And let me just ask you this. As far as you know, you've never seen anyone pass out from doing Burma Road, right?
Yeah.
Never seen anyone pass out from practice too.
Yeah, I think so.
right? And that's because in this kind of heat, you got to have water. Wouldn't you agree?
Of course.
You got to have water breaks.
Yeah.
And what we can't agree is that there's water bottles that are supplied to you at every practice.
Yeah.
You can grab those water bottles during your breaks.
Yes.
Any player can.
Yeah.
And now those breaks, depending on the practice, are usually about once an hour, right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Sometimes they can be more, sometimes they can be less.
Yeah.
Just depends on what you're doing at practice. Would you agree?
Yeah, it depends on what coach says.
Right. And what you can't tell us, Mr. Saracen, is how many breaks you had that day.
Yeah.
Could have been 3.
I mean, I don't remember any breaks, but.
Well, what we can't agree on is that if you needed water, you could have gotten it. Isn't that right?
If we had a break.
As far as you know, Coach Taylor's never prevented anyone on your team from getting water.
As far as I know.
Okay. Now, I want to talk about when you're not doing Burma, when you're not doing scrimmages, you're working on your technique for soccer, right?
Yeah.
You got to learn to work together as a team.
Yes.
To communicate.
Yeah.
You got to learn the technical drills.
Yeah.
One of those is passing.
Yes.
One of those is tackling as well.
Yes.
Right? Because slide tackling, it's just part of the game. It's a natural part of soccer.
Yeah, it is.
And you got to know how to do it correctly.
Yes.
There's no question that it's physical.
Very physical.
But good soccer teams know how to slide tackle properly.
I believe they do.
And in your words, it's not usually dangerous.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about kind of what a normal practice schedule looks like, but now I really want to just get into your relationship with Rory. Now, the two of you were very close.
Yeah, he's my best friend.
Right? You played soccer together your entire lives.
We did.
He was your best friend. That means he confided in you, right?
Yeah.
Trusted you.
Yes.
Then you knew Rory, he was under pressure.
I did.
He was under pressure to play well.
He was.
Certainly from Coach Taylor.
Right.
And also from his mother, right?
Right.
Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is eliciting hearsay.
Second. Okay. I'd pause the time. All right. What's your objection?
We anticipate the counsel is eliciting hearsay by going into the pressures that Rory did or did not experience at home. So the objection is hearsay, Your Honor.
Response?
Yeah, I anticipate that this witness is going to say that Rory told him personally that he was under pressure to get a scholarship, as well as the pressure coming from the soccer team. This is a statement by party opponent.
Your Honor, Rory is not a party opponent in this case, and therefore is not a statement of a party opponent.
Your Honor, this case is being brought on behalf of the estate of Rory. Rory is an agent of the estate. He's the essential reason we are here today.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Last response.
In order to be an agent under the party opponent exclusion, you have to be an agent at the time the conduct happened, not an agent of the estate suing now, and therefore that does not fall under this exception to hearsay.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
Now, you understand that Rory was under pressure to get a scholarship.
Yes.
And even the week before Rory passed away, she told you he wished he could relax.
Yeah, he did.
Wished he could just be a normal kid.
Yes.
Even wished the soccer season was just over.
Yeah.
But you understand, even understanding that pressure that Rory was facing, it would still surprise you if Rory, acted out by doing drugs.
He never did drugs as far as I.
Right. That would be something that was unexpected for you.
Right.
And certainly if you heard that cocaine was in Rory's system at the time he died, that would be a surprise to you.
It would.
It's not something that you would expect out of him.
Right.
Okay, now I want to talk about how Rory was acting on the day he passed away. And I apologize we have to get into this, but we've just got to talk about the nature of what happened. You remember that day, of course, very clearly.
I do.
Coach Taylor sent you to Burma Road.
He did.
And then sent Rory to Burma Road.
Right.
And that's when Rory was starting to struggle, right?
He was, yeah.
He was feeling funny.
Yeah.
He was grabbing his chest.
Yeah.
And this was also unexpected for you.
It was.
Right. Like you said, on your direct examination, Rory was tough.
Yeah.
He wasn't the type of person to give in.
Yeah.
He wasn't the type of person to let on that he wasn't feeling well.
That's right.
Right. And earlier in your deposition, you told a story that once Rory went through an entire soccer game with a broken nose. Isn't that right?
He did.
Didn't once complain about it.
That's true.
Didn't utter a peep about his pain.
Right.
So when Rory got called over to do this slide tackling drill, this was after talking to you.
Yeah.
And on your direct examination, you told us a lot about the interactions between Rory and Coach Taylor. And what you can't tell us is that Rory ever told Coach Taylor, hey, I'm not feeling good.
Right.
That was never said.
Yes, you're right.
Didn't ever tell the trainer he needed to take a break.
Right.
And you never told him that either. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Well, as far as we know, the only people who knew anything about Rory's physical condition were you and Rory. Isn't that right?
Right.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Anything on redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Go ahead.
Mrs. Saracen, you were asked several questions about who else knew about the symptoms that Rory was experiencing on that day that he died. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Why didn't you tell anyone at soccer practice about Rory's condition?
I mean, during practice, we just don't usually want to complain, if you want to put that word on it, because we know that Coach Taylor will probably punish us and make us run Burma again or make us run another drill. So we usually try to keep ourselves quiet to not get Coach's wrath.
And you also were asked some questions about the breaks you received that day. Just to be clear for the court, from the time that you watched Rory run the first drill, the Burma Road, and then the second drill, the slide tackles, did you see Coach Taylor give Rory a break?
I didn't.
Did you see Coach Taylor offer Rory any water?
I didn't.
You mentioned on your direct that Rory collapsed after the first slide tackle. After this, did Coach Taylor give Rory a break?
No, he just picked him up and told him to keep going.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Very well. Are you done with this witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Saracen, you may step down. Any other witnesses?
Your Honor, that concludes all our live witnesses, but we move to enter the deposition of Jordan Street, pursuant to Federal Rule of Evidence 804A and pursuant to Stipulation 5.
The deposition in its entirety?
We move to constructively read that in its entirety, Your Honor, but also we ask that we can read in certain portions for the court's attention. We don't want to waste the court's time by reading in the whole thing, but with your permission, we would like to read in sections of that deposition.
Any objection? And assume that was no objections.
Apologies, Your Honor. I'm still figuring out this technology. We have no objection to that, Your Honor. However, we would like to read in particular portions of the testimony as well.
Okay, we'll go ahead and take this in order then. You can go ahead and read in the sections you want read in, plaintiff, and then we'll allow the defense to go ahead and read in the sections they would like to read in.
Yes, Your Honor. May I have my co-counsel assist me in reading in the deposition questions?
If that is the format you would like to use, you're free to use that format.
Yes, Your Honor. May we proceed?
Okay.
Reading from the deposition of Jordan Street, directing court and counsel to page 2, line 6. Question, good morning. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Jordan Street.
Moving to line 15. Question, do you have any children?
I did, my son Rory.
Moving down to page 4, line 14. Question, was soccer something the two of you shared?
You know, I played soccer in college, so I already loved the game.
Moving to page 6, line 12. Question, did he use drugs?
Absolutely not. If I had suspected that or seen any evidence of that, then there would have been serious consequences. Whenever Rory acted up in the past, even just threats of grounding and chores around the house proved to be effective deterrents. I have no idea why that test showed that, but it can't be accurate.
Moving to page 7, line 19. Question, when you were playing soccer at Waco High, did you ever have to run the Burma Road?
Hell yeah, we did. I remember doing that when we were dogging it or if we weren't in the correct position or something. Coach would send us off to run Burma Road. But I'll tell you this, none of my coaches ever made me or any other kid keep going when it was obvious that we were exhausted. Discipline is one thing, but that is just dangerous.
Do you know what a slide tackle is?
Sure.
Moving to line 10, page 8.
They can be. I mean, it's soccer, so a lot of the injuries are pretend acting. But at any time you're running full speed and you slide feet first at another player's legs, that can be a dangerous situation.
Why are they dangerous?
I mean, I just mentioned breaking my leg in college from getting slide tackled.
And moving to page 9, line 3, question, is it important to teach slide tackling as a coach?
Yes, it is, but that isn't what happened here. This wasn't a drill to teach Rory how to slide tackle or defend against them. Rory knew how to slide tackle and how to avoid them. This was about punishment. Coach Taylor lost his temper and went too far. That drill wasn't necessary. In all the time that I've played, coached, and watched soccer, I've never seen a drill like that. Not once.
Your Honor, that concludes the reading in from Jordan Street's testimony.
Very well. Defense counsel, do you have anything you'd like to read in for the deposition?
Yes, Your Honor, just a few more lines to complement that.
Very well.
Turning court and counsel's attention to page 3, line 1 through 2. Were you at practice that day?
No, I was at work.
Turning court and counsel's attention to page 6, line 18 through 22. Was Rory a discipline problem?
No, not any more than other kids that age. I mean, he was a little wild and liked to have fun, but he wasn't some hippie smoking dope behind the school or some party animal who stayed out all night.
And finally, page 8, line 5 through 8. Question, are slide tackles a part of the game of soccer?
Of course they are. Turn on any game and you're going to see players at every level performing slide tackles. That's part of the deal.
And with that, Your Honor, we are done with our reading in.
Very well. Anything else, plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor, pursuant to stipulation again, we move to enter exhibits 16 and 17. This is the expert Dr. McConaughey's report and his CV.
My understanding of the pretrial order is that exhibits 16 and 17 are already entered into evidence.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, in order to not waste the court's time, we'd like to just read in a selection from this report with permission from you, Your Honor.
That would be fine, barring no objections from defense.
No objection, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Directing court and counsel to page 2 of exhibit 16, overview of opinions. Here is the opinion that I have reached in this case. Based on a reasonable degree of professional and/or medical certainty, Rory Street died as a result of heat exhaustion and/or heat stroke. Moving to page 3, same exhibit, second paragraph. These symptoms are consistent with heat exhaustion and/or heat stroke. Rory Street's pale skin, apparent weakness, potential dizziness, which is indicated by the fact that he felt funny and felt down on multiple occasions, fatigue, which is again indicated by continually falling down and struggling, potential abdominal pain, which is indicated by the groaning and a rapid heartbeat, which is indicated by the chest pain, are all symptoms that are commonly associated with heat exhaustion and or heat stroke. Additionally, the description of Rory lying down on the ground and convulsing is consistent with a seizure, which is a sign of heat stroke. Additionally, there are several findings in the autopsy report that are consistent with heat exhaustion and or heat stroke. First, the autopsy report indicates that Rory Street had cerebral edema. This is often caused by and is completely consistent with heat exhaustion and or heat stroke. Also, the finding of muscle breakdown is also consistent with heat exhaustion and or heat stroke. Moving to the last paragraph, it is also my opinion within a reasonable degree of medical certainty that Rory Street's death was not a result of cocaine use. First, even if there was cocaine use on the day in question, there is no indication that Rory Street was a habitual user of cocaine, as indicated on the autopsy report by the fact that there was no irritation of the throat. Moving to page 4, the amount of cocaine found in Rory Street's system was only 60 milliliters, which is a finding consistent with the ingestion of only a nominal amount of cocaine, or that there was a great deal of time between ingestion and testing. With that, Your Honor, that concludes the reading in of the expert report.
Very good. Anything else?
Your Honor, the plaintiff rests at this time.
Very well. All right. Before we move into, I'm sorry, defense, do you have any motions you'd like to make at this time?
Yes, Your Honor. Prior to moving into the defense case, the defense moves for a judgment as a matter of law. In viewing the evidence in the light most favorable to the non-movement party, in that case, this would be the plaintiff. The plaintiff has failed to put forth sufficient evidence to show that Coach Taylor was the proximate cause of Rory's death. Specifically, Your Honor, they failed to show that this action was foreseeable, that Coach Taylor could have foreseen that death was a product of his actions. And with that, we ask that you grant our motion.
Any response from the plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor. In viewing the evidence in the light most favorable to the non-moving party here, the plaintiff, we have presented sufficient evidence for a reasonable finder of fact to find that the defendant's conduct was the proximate cause of Rory Street's death. Specifically, we have shown that Rory Street had visible signs of trauma. He was out of breath, he was pale, he was collapsing on the field, and despite this, the defendant chose to introduce a new drill that he'd never tested before, that he'd never tried on any other student, in order to push Rory Street to his limits. And he should have foreseen that this would cause the death of Rory Street. Rory Street was already in a bad medical condition, and the defendant introduced a drill that pushed him to his death, Your Honor. And because of that, we have met our burden.
Okay. The motion's denied. All right. This time the plaintiff's rested, and we've been asked not to take any breaks and kind of move forward to keep the timeline moving. So we're not going to take a break. That being said, I do want to give you guys an update on your times. As it stands right now, the plaintiff, you have 28 minutes and 41 seconds remaining in your time. Defense, you have 35 minutes and 38 seconds remaining in your time. Any questions about that?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
Very well. Defense, do you have a case in chief?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Reese Taylor to the stand.
Mr. Taylor, are you here?
Yep.
You are here. Michelle, you are constructively sworn. However, you're going to give me about 30 seconds to get this timer set up right before y'all start. Okay. You may begin.
Mr. Taylor, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Reese Taylor.
What do you do for a living?
I am a high school soccer coach and teacher.
How did you become a high school soccer coach?
I always knew that I wanted to be a coach. So whenever I went to college, I studied physical education and just kind of started from there.
How long have you been doing this?
Well, I've been a coach for about 26 years now in total.
Well, how about Waco High School? How long have you been there?
I've been at Waco High for about 6 years now.
Do you have any kind of record that you can tell us?
Yeah, we have a winning record ever since I've been the soccer coach there, so I'm pretty happy about that. We've gone to the playoffs quite frequently, and we've gone pretty far in the playoffs since I've been the coach there.
Well, let's talk about what makes a good soccer team. Tell us what goes into coaching. How do you make a good team?
Well, there's a lot that goes into coaching. One, you have to have the respect of your team and your players, and they also have to be disciplined. And I think that's a really pivotal point in being a good coach and having a good team is having a disciplined team.
We really need to break down how you do discipline your players because the judge has heard a lot about this. So what form of discipline do you use?
Just various things. I mean, sometimes you just gotta, make the team run sprints or, different shooting drills or things like that. Another common theme that we employ here at Waco High is Burma Road.
And why is running sprints and this Burma Road, how is that important to a soccer program?
Well, there's a majority of reasons. I mean, there's a variety of reasons why. For example, is just building team morale and camaraderie. Whenever a team kind of works together and kind of struggles together, it builds a stronger bond, for one. But it also shows the team to kind of listen to you to help make them better players and make a better team cohesively.
We need to differentiate between discipline, Coach Taylor, and punishment. Can you describe the difference between those two?
Yeah, I think it's the difference between the two is where it stems from and what it roots from. And I think punishment comes from a place of maybe anger and a bad motive, whereas discipline comes from a place where you want the team to be better, and you want the team to do better, and you want the individual player to be and do better as well.
At any point during this past season, did you punish your players?
I did, yeah. I've had various players run Burma Road.
Well, let me just be clear. You just described the difference.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you say punish?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said discipline. No, punish. No, I wouldn't let my ego or anger get the best of me, rather than disciplining.
It's fine, Coach Taylor. We'll blame it on the technology.
Yeah.
Let's move on. I want you to describe what a typical practice looks like.
Typical practice, probably like around 3 o'clock, we'll have the whole team out and we'll run scrimmages or different drills, conditioning as well. So exercising, running, stuff like that, push-ups, shooting.
Is one of those drills slide tackling?
Yes. I mean, that's inherent in the game of soccer. So there are times where slide tackling is included.
And describe why it's important to teach how to slide tackle.
Well, it's important because you don't want somebody to get hurt. You don't want an opposing player to get hurt. You don't want your player to get hurt. And slide tackling can be dangerous if done improperly. So it's important to teach players how to slide tackle. Also, it's important for the game. A bad slide tackle can end up causing a penalty, and a penalty can end up losing a game. So.
Okay, so now that we understand kind of the basic structure of practice, we also need to talk about the heat, because we've talked a lot about this Waco heat. Why are you practicing in these conditions?
Well, if you're practicing in an indoor facility where it's air conditioned, the team's not going to be prepared for a real life scenario. And the fact of the matter is that we play in the heat and we play outside. And in order to prepare our team, we have to play in similar conditions that we're going to be playing in later.
And when you're playing in the heat, are you providing water to your players?
Of course.
Have you ever prevented a player from getting a sip of water?
No.
Okay. Now that we understand kind of the foundation of your team and your practices, I want to move to Rory. Now, describe Rory to us.
He was a great player, star player. He was great, but he did have some problems with authority.
Well, what kind of coaching relationship did you have with Rory? Did you have many problems?
No, I would say we had a pretty good coach-player relationship.
Okay. Was it unusual for Rory to act up?
I mean, he wouldn't act up, but like I said, he did have issues with authority at times.
Well, I want you to take us to September 7th. What was up with Rory on that day?
That particular day, he was dogging it. He was kind of just lollygagging and not taking practice very serious.
Now, we've heard about Rory's physical state from his friend. Now, based on what you saw, is there anything physically wrong with Rory?
No, he just looked like he wasn't taking practice very serious and just wasn't in the proper position and stuff like that.
Was it fair to suggest that it was more of an attitude?
Yeah, it seemed like he was just having a bad attitude that day. Like he just was, like I said, lollygagging.
And how did you respond to this?
Well, I got on to him and I told him to run Burma Road.
And when you sent Rory to Burma Road, did any of it change?
No, again, he was lollygagging. He was running with a friend and they were just kind of goofing off.
At any point, did Rory say, "Hey, coach, my chest is hurting. I need to stop"?
No, never.
At any point, did he say, I'm not feeling so well"?
No, he never said anything.
Is it fair to say that as far as you observed, he was merely goofing off?
Yeah, it seemed like he was just goofing off, just lollygagging.
Okay, we got to talk about how you responded to this, how your mood changed. Tell us what you were feeling during all of this.
I mean, whenever you see a player goofing off and kind of not listening to you, it kind of makes you upset. And so at that point, I was just kind of frustrated with Rory for not taking practice serious, especially when, we have a goal in mind, and that's to win state. We all had that goal. And
so tell us what you decided to do with Rory after he wasn't responding to Burma Road.
Well, after that, I called him over and I had him run a slide tackling drill.
And now we have to be straight about this. Was this slide tackling drill, was it a punishment?
I would say it's walking the line between discipline and punishment.
Now, before it started, did Rory tell you, "Coach, there's something wrong. I don't feel well"?
No, he didn't say anything to me.
Did he ask to get water?
No.
Did he tell you his chest was hurting?
No, he didn't say anything.
Anything to indicate that Rory wasn't feeling well?
No, I had no idea.
Okay, now we've got to move into those moments because the judge has heard that you were actually physically pulling Rory up off the ground at one point. And the judge needs to know, why didn't you stop?
I mean, it just still seemed like he was lollygagging and wasn't taking things very serious. So I just, whenever he was on the ground, I just picked him up.
Did anything about his physical state suggest that he was physically ill?
No, it just seemed like he was having like a poor attitude that day.
But you weren't the only person around that day. Who else was there?
There was a trainer there.
And was the trainer observing Rory?
Yeah, she was there. She saw
At any point, did the trainer suggest you stop the drill?
No.
At any point, did the trainer suggest Rory didn't look so good?
No, nothing.
Now, at this point, now, in retrospect, you've heard now that cocaine was in Rory's system. Was it ever suggested to you that Rory could have been experimenting with drugs?
No, I had no idea. I mean, he was such a star player. I couldn't imagine him risking losing scholarships or opportunities with drugs.
Would it surprise you to hear that cocaine was in his system?
Yes, I was very shocked and surprised by that.
Would that be something that was unexpected?
Very unexpected.
Your Honor, pass the witness.
Anything on cross?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Good morning, Coach Taylor.
Morning.
Now, just to be clear, you're in charge of the field during soccer practice, right?
Yep.
Not your trainer?
No.
No one else, it's you.
I'm in charge of the practice, yes.
And as the one in charge, you have the responsibility to players, right?
Yes.
You're supposed to look out for their safety.
Along with the trainer.
Well, you're the one in charge, right, Coach?
Yes.
Now, safety of your players is supposed to be your number one priority.
Yes, always.
Over winning.
Yes, of course.
Over discipline.
Yes.
Over getting respect from your players, you said on direct, right?
Yes.
Now, keeping your players safe includes making sure they're healthy.
Yes.
And players' health can be a concern in hot weather, right?
It can be.
Now, if you see a player struggling on your soccer field, you can help them.
Yeah, if I see them struggling.
Right. And if you see them struggling, you can ask them how they are feeling.
Sure.
You can call one of your trainers over.
Yep.
You can get them water,
Sure.
medical attention.
They need it.
That's all under your control, right?
Sure.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
And on September 7th, you didn't do any of those things with Rory, right?
No, I didn't feel the need to.
Now we'll get to why you didn't feel the need to in just a moment, but let's just talk about varsity soccer. It's a competitive sport, right?
Yes.
You would consider yourself a competitive person?
Yeah.
We can agree that your job success is measured by how many competitions you win as a coach.
Not necessarily, but I guess that's a component.
Well, a big component of being a coach for a varsity soccer team is how often your team wins, right?
Yes.
You will agree with me that the more your team wins, the more successful you are as a coach, right?
Sure. Yes.
And the more successful you are, it opens you up to more promotions, right?
I'm not sure what that means.
Well, if you're successful with a team at a high school level, you can be promoted to college level, right?
Possibly.
And possibly if you're promoted, that would mean more money for you, right?
That's something someone cares about, I guess.
Is it your testimony you don't care about money?
I mean, it's nice to have, but it's not everything.
Just winning is the most important thing, right?
I mean, sure.
Now, you attend coaches' clinics several times a year. Is that right?
I do.
And you do this to keep up on the latest coaching techniques, right?
Yes.
To keep up on best practices in your industry.
Yes.
This includes attending the annual meeting of Texas high school soccer coaches, right?
Yep.
And you're a Texas high school soccer coach, right?
Yes.
You'd agree with me that the meeting you attended of this association was important, right?
Yes.
And you attended this meeting on June 15, 2018. You remember that?
I did, yeah.
That's before Rory Street died on your field, right?
Yes.
Directing court and counsel at this time and the witness to Exhibit 11. Do you have that in front of you, Coach Taylor?
I can pull it up.
Let me know when you get to it.
Okay, I have that in front of me.
Now you recognize this document as the slideshow you saw that day when you attended the meeting, right?
Yes,
You recognize that because you were in attendance at that meeting.
I was.
And these slides are in the same or substantially the same condition as they last were when you saw them on June 15th, right?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff offers what's been pre-marked for identification as Exhibit 11 into evidence as Exhibit 11.
Any objections?
No objection.
Okay, then the exhibit marked as Exhibit 11 is entered into evidence.
Permission to publish that to the court, Your Honor?
The permission is granted.
Now you see the slides from that presentation on the screen in front of you, right, Coach?
Yes, I do.
And these slides, I'll let my co-counsel put that up. Moving to the second page of that, these slides instruct coaches like you on what to do when practicing in high temperatures, right?
Yes.
Now we can agree that on September 7th, it was a hot day.
Yeah, it was a hot day.
You're aware the temperature was above 100 degrees that day?
I don't remember exactly, but it sounds right.
We can agree that it's hot.
It was hot, yes.
And we can agree that based on the slide from the presentation that you attended, when temperatures are above 100 degrees, practices must include a 5-minute break every 15 minutes. You see that, right?
Yeah, that's what it says on the slides.
Now, you didn't have a break every 15 minutes during a practice that day, right?
I don't remember exactly how many breaks we had.
Well, we can agree that between Rory starting his first drill at Burma Road and doing his second drill at slide tackling, there were no breaks given, right?
That's true.
And that was over 15 minutes, right?
I I don't remember exactly. Maybe.
Is it your testimony today that Rory was given a break between the 2 drills that you assigned him?
No, that's not my testimony.
Okay, so there were no breaks given to Rory on that day. Is that right?
No, that's correct.
Now, it also says further down on the slide that the break should be in the shade if possible.
Yes.
Now, there was no shade on the field on September 7th, right?
No.
Now, you could have put up tents on that field.
Sure.
That would have provided shade,
That would have.
but you chose not to. Is that right?
Yeah, I chose not to.
Now, we can agree that on September 7th, you were frustrated by Rory's performance at soccer practice.
I was frustrated with him. Yes.
You believe that he was goofing off.
Yes.
You believe that he wasn't listening to you.
Yes.
In fact, nothing gets you angrier than when a player is not listening to your directions on the field. Is that right?
I mean, it's frustrating to deal with. Yeah.
Well, in fact, nothing gets you heated up quicker than a player not listening to you, right, Coach Taylor?
Sure.
In response to this, you started yelling at Rory, right?
I did. Yes.
Now, you said on direct that people punish when they're angry, right?
That's not what I said. I said it comes from a bad place.
You will agree that anger comes from a bad place, right?
Sure.
Now, after you started yelling at Rory, you made him do some drills, right?
I did.
And that was to teach him a lesson,
Yes.
to discipline him.
Yes.
Now, as you did on direct, it's easy to confuse punishment with these with disciplining and doing drills, right?
There can be a fine line.
Now, we'll talk some more about that fine line in just a moment. But as to the first drill you made him do, the Burma Road, just to be clear, that involved sprinting for 30 yards, right?
Yes.
And then dribbling for another 30 yards,
Yes.
and then crawling on the ground like a bear for 60 yards.
Yeah. Yeah. Back. Yes.
And you claim on direct that was to boost morale for your team.
Yes.
And at this point, we're still on the fine line between punishment and discipline.
I believe that's discipline.
Now, you kept making Rory repeat this until you told him not to, right?
Yes.
You didn't give him a set number of Burma roads to do, right?
No.
Now, at this time, when he was overdoing Burma roads, you weren't watching him, right?
I was glancing back and forth, but I wasn't watching him now.
To be clear, you were on the other side of the field with your players during soccer practice, right?
I was.
And you didn't send your trainer over to go see him?
I don't know what the trainer was doing.
You don't know where your trainer was?
I don't know what he was doing at that time, or what she was doing at that time.
Well, you never told your trainer to go and take a look at Rory who was doing drills, right?
No.
Now, you weren't satisfied with the way he was doing these drills. We can agree with that?
I agree.
So you decided to discipline him again.
Yes.
You made Rory do a side tackle drill this time, right?
I did.
Now, before moving from one drill to the second, you didn't ask Rory if he was okay, did you?
No, I did not.
Didn't ask him if he needed a break?
No.
To be clear, you didn't give him a break, right?
No, I didn't.
Didn't give him any water?
No. No.
Now, for this drill, the slide tackle drill, you had the entire soccer team line up and tackle Rory, right?
Slide tackle. Yeah.
Right. And we can agree that a slide tackle involves physical contact?
It can.
Well, to be clear, it involves one player sliding into the player holding the ball, right?
Yeah, into the ball, not the player.
And the probability is that the player holding the ball will fall down at some point, right?
It's possible, yes.
You didn't offer Rory any protective gear before setting him up with this drill, did you?
No.
Now, you ordered the entire team to perform these tackles on Rory, right?
Yes.
And this was done more than once.
Yes.
In fact, it was done 14 or 15 times.
Something around that.
You're not sure how many times you had him tackled. You know it was around that amount, right?
Yes.
So we can agree that going into this, you didn't have a set plan for the number of slide tackles that were going to occur to Rory, right?
No.
At this point, are we still walking the line between discipline and punishment, Coach Taylor?
Yes, I'd say we're walking that line.
Now let's talk about these slide tackles some more. You've never used these before prior to using them on Rory, right?
This particular drill, no.
This particular drill in your 26 years of coaching, you'd never used before.
No.
You've actually never even seen it used.
I don't think so, no.
And as a soccer player, you never did this drill, right?
I don't remember.
You don't remember? Just a moment ago, you said you'd never seen this used, right, Coach Taylor?
As a coach, but as a player, I don't remember.
We can agree that you invented this form, this drill, in order to discipline Rory that day, right?
I did employ it to discipline Rory, yes.
And it's something that you'd never tried before during practice, right?
That's correct.
Now, you saw Rory struggling during this drill.
I don't think he was struggling. I mean, he looked like he was just going through the drill, lollygagging.
Is it your testimony, Coach Taylor, that Rory was not struggling during this drill?
I mean, not more than what any other player would during a particular drill.
I'm going to focus you back onto the player who died on your pitch, focusing on his conduct only. Is it your testimony that he wasn't struggling during your second drill?
I guess he was struggling.
At this point, after you saw him struggling, you didn't ask him how he was feeling.
No.
You didn't call a trainer over.
Nope.
You didn't get him any water.
Nope.
You didn't stop the drill when you saw your player was struggling.
No.
You just kept having your teammates tackle him, right?
My players, yes.
Now, eventually, you saw Rory collapse in front of you.
Yes, that did happen.
And that was after maybe 14 or 15 slide tackles. You couldn't keep count, right?
Yes.
He started to shake on the floor.
Yes.
He started to look like he started to have what looked like a seizure on the floor.
Yes.
At this point, you didn't bring him any water, did you?
I don't remember what I did after that.
You don't remember what you did? Well, we can agree that you didn't call the ambulance that day, right?
I think the trainer may have. I don't remember who called the ambulance.
Coach Taylor, you did nothing after your player fell down, shaking on the ground. You didn't do anything, right?
I wouldn't say I just left him there lying there. I don't think I did nothing exactly, but I just don't remember if I called the ambulance or not.
So it's your testimony to this jury that you have no memory of what happened when a player on your field fell down and died.
Yeah, I mean, it's a traumatic experience, you know.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Anything on redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, 1 second.
No.
Okay, go ahead.
Coach Taylor, you were asked a lot of questions about your desire to win. What do you need? Let me rephrase that. You ask a lot of questions about your desire to win. Do you need healthy players in order to win?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you can't have a winning team without healthy players.
And now, if you're so obsessed with winning, what effect would losing Rory have on the team season?
It would be detrimental to our season and our team.
Now, at any point, and I know we talked about how you never asked Rory if he was okay, but if at any point, did Rory come to you asking for help?
No.
Saying, Coach, I just need to sit this one out.
No, he never said anything to me.
Was there any indication that besides just being tired, Rory was physically unwell?
No, it just looked like he was tired, like any other player would during drills.
Okay, I want to take a brief look at the PowerPoint, the presentation that you just commented on. So I'm going to give my co-counsel a second to pull up page 2 of that. All right, I'm looking at that second bullet where it says temperatures that reach 105 degrees.
Okay.
Now, it says that practices must include a 5-minute break about every 15 minutes of practice in the shade if possible. Are there times when water breaks aren't possible every 15 minutes?
I mean, depending if we're like in a heated scrimmage and, you know, things are going well, then.
What were you doing that day?
We were having a scrimmage that day.
Now, that third bullet said Water must always be available to players during practice. Was water available to Rory on that day?
Of course, water is always available for our players.
No further questions. May this witness be excused, Your Honor?
This witness may step down. Defense, do you have anything else you would like to offer in your case? I think you're muted.
Sorry, Your Honor, I keep getting used to muting it.
Not a problem.
That concludes our live testimony. But just like the plaintiff, we would like to publish some material from Mr. Mayweather's deposition, as well as read in some of the expert witnesses' testimony.
So specifically, Jess Merriweather is
Yes,
the
Your Honor.
deposition you'd like to enter?
Yes.
Any
If I may.
objections to that for the plaintiff?
No, Your Honor, this was discussed during pretrial.
Okay. And do you want to read any part of that deposition?
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to publish by way of my co-counsel.
That's fine.
All right. Now, turning court and counsel's attention to page 8, line 18 through 24. At any time, did you see Rory stumbling, faltering, or slowing down in a way that would have indicated that he was in trouble?
No, not at all.
Was Rory sweating hard?
I mean, yes, but everyone was, including me. It was a really hot day.
Now, turning court and counsel's attention to page 9, lines 1 through 2. Question, did Rory ever say anything to you about feeling bad that day?
Nope, never said anything to me.
And then on the same page, lines 9 through 11. Question, are players allowed to get water when they want?
Yes, all they have to do is ask, even if we're not on a water break.
Yeah, with that, we are ready to proceed to publishing a toxicology report, as well as the pre-admitted expert report and treatise in this case. May my co-counsel do that by way of screen sharing and publishing?
Let's pause for 1 second. Plaintiff, do you have anything you'd like to read from this deposition?
Yes, Your Honor, we have a few counter designations that we'd like to read at this time.
Okay, give me a second. All right, go ahead.
Directing court and counsel to page 8 of Ms. Merriweather's deposition, line 8. Question, were you at practice the day Rory died?
I was.
Did you see Rory running Burma Road?
I saw Rory over on Burma Road, but I wasn't watching him closely.
Did you see Rory during the slide tackling drill?
Again, I saw that it was happening, and I certainly saw parts of it, but I didn't watch it closely.
What were you doing while all this was going on?
I was taping another student's ankle about 40 yards away.
Moving to page 10, line 6. Question, do you still work at Waco High?
Yeah, I got promoted to head trainer about 2 months ago, so it's going great.
Do you still work with Coach Taylor?
Of course I do. I work with all the coaches, Coach Taylor included. In fact, Coach Taylor is the one that wrote me the recommendation letter for the promotion to head trainer. Again, Coach Taylor has a lot of faith in me and my abilities, and I just want to try to impress him.
With that, Your Honor, the plaintiff is done with its counter designations for this witness.
Very well. Okay, defense counsel, you mentioned you had some other information you wanted to read into the record.
Yes, Your Honor, starting with Exhibit 15, the toxicology report.
Okay, and this has been admitted previously.
And I'll have my co-counsel screen share and publish to Your Honor by way of reading. Let's see if there might be an issue here.
Specimen blood, drug, cocaine, positive, amount 60.
And with that, Your Honor, we move to enter into evidence, which has already been pre-admitted into evidence, and publish an excerpt from Spencer London's expert report, excuse me.
I'm sorry, can you repeat what that motion? I didn't catch it.
Exhibit 18, Your Honor.
Okay.
Publishing a portion of Exhibit 18, which is an expert report.
Here is the opinion that I have reached in this case based on a reasonable degree of professional and/or medical certainty. Rory Street's death was caused at least in part by the use of cocaine.
And finally, Your Honor, Exhibit 20, which has not yet been entered into evidence, but is a treatise which falls under the hearsay exceptions because both experts relied on this.
My understanding, oh, it has not. You're correct. I apologize. So I assume you want to read it?
Yes, Your Honor, just portions of it.
Very well. Any objections to that, counsel?
No, Your Honor.
Okay.
Generally, exertional heat stroke, which is heat stroke brought on as a result of strenuous exercise or activity, does not result in death. Only 3 to 5% of exertional heat stroke cases result in death each year. Heat, exertion, and recreational drug use can work together to increase the risk of heat exhaustion and heat stroke. For example, cocaine use can result in hyperthermia, which inhibits the body's natural cooling process by constricting the blood vessels, clamping down on blood flow, and preventing blood from reaching the skin where it could be cooled. Thus, if cocaine use is combined with overexertion in extremely hot conditions, then it would only serve to exacerbate the risks associated with heat exhaustion and heat stroke, and it could lead to a cascade of symptoms associated with heat exhaustion and heat stroke.
And Your Honor, with that, the defense rests their case.
Very well. Okay, give me 1 second. Do either of you need a few minutes to get ready for your closing?
Yes, Your Honor, if time permits.
Yes, Your Honor.
I can give you all a couple minutes if that's what you need. Let me give you time, how much time you have left real quick. Plaintiff, you have 14 minutes and 4 seconds remaining. Defense, you have 19 minutes and 45 seconds remaining.
Yes, Your Honor.
Take the time you need to get ready for your closing. All right, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And plaintiff, take it away. Would you like any kind of time warning if you get close to?
Yes, Your Honor. We reserve any additional time for rebuttal with Your Honor's permission, and also a 2-minute warning would be appreciated, Your Honor.
2-minute warning. 2-minute warning, aye.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
You're useless on the field, so I might as well run you until you pass out. Your Honor, those are not the words of a reasonable person. That is not what a person charged with protecting his players' safety and their health should be saying to his players. But those words, run you until you pass out, is what the defendant told Rory Street moments before he collapsed at his soccer practice, shaking, seizing, and then dying because of the negligent actions of his coach, the person responsible for him on that field, the defendant. Now, the defendant opened on no one saw this coming, but Your Honor, Coach Taylor saw this coming. He was the closest person to the situation. It was his field, his players, his drills that killed Rory Street. It was the defendant's responsibility to know what was going on and to know what happened to Rory Street on September 7th. What happened was egregious. It was preventable, and it was under the defendant's control. Now, Your Honor, we've proven to you by a preponderance of the evidence that the defendant was negligent. He had a duty to conduct practices in a reasonable manner that protected the health and safety of his players like Rory Street. Instead, Coach Taylor breached this duty by going against industry practice, giving Rory no breaks, inadequate supervision, and forcing him to do grueling physical drills, punishments. And these drills were untested and unsafe to be doing in such hot weather. This resulted in the death of my client's son and any hopes that Rory Street had of a bright future. Now, make no mistake, this wasn't just a regular soccer practice. The defendant was angry. You heard him on cross-examination. Nothing gets the defendant more heated than when a player, especially a superstar player like Rory Street, doesn't listen to him. Coach Taylor even described these drills as punishments on direct. He let his guard down, and it's easy to slip when you're hiding the truth, because the reality is these drills were a punishment. And he wanted to punish Rory Street. Now, you heard the defendant on cross. He fought me at every single question. He didn't even want to admit to you that winning is good for his coaching record. And that's because he knows what he did to Rory Street on September 7th was wrong, and it caused his death. In 100-degree weather, he had him running 2 drills. First, the Burma Road that consists of sprinting, dribbling, and crawling around the ground like an animal. This is a drill designed to punish. This doesn't walk the line between punishment and discipline. This is punishment. You heard that his own teammate Aubrey saw that Rory was pale, was experiencing chest pains, and wasn't feeling well at all. The defendant even admitted that Rory was struggling, even though it took a while for him to do so on cross. Now, the defendant's response to this was not compassion or worry for his player. Instead, he invented a brand new form of punishment: death by slide tackles. One after the other, he lost count of how many he made Rory do. But these were invented for Rory. In his 26 years of coaching, you heard the defendant say he'd never used this type of tackle before, and that's because it's dangerous. It's painful, and it's unnecessary. You can look at the guidelines for soccer coaches in Texas on Exhibit 11, and it says there that these should be used only when necessary. Slide tackling is in of itself a dangerous thing to do. That's one slide tackle. 15 in a row, one after the other, falling down, getting knocked down. That is what was going on in the defendant's practice, the practice that he had control over. 15 of these in a row is a death sentence. The defendant saw this coming. Team that with the scorching heat, and even an athlete as strong as Rory, a superstar in his own right, was going to crumble. This was a punishment. There was no line walked here, pure and simple punishment. This was not discipline. The defendant wanted to make an example out of Rory, and instead he killed him. Now, you heard a lot about how hot it was on September 7th, so let's talk about this. You have the weather report in front of you, Exhibit 21, and we're not arguing that because it was over 100 degrees, you should cancel all soccer practice. Rather, we're saying you need to be reasonable and understand when the weather is a problem. Give your players water breaks. Allow them some shade. You saw what the industry practice guidelines mandate in Texas. The defendant was supposed to conduct soccer practices with breaks every 15 minutes when the temperature is over 100 degrees. He didn't give Rory a single break during September 7th while he was running those 2 drills and getting tackled by his teammates. These breaks should be given in the shade. Again, common sense tells you that. You want to be out of the sun. There was no shade on the field on September 7th. The defendant didn't bother to have a tent erected, nothing to help his players out, to prevent the death of Rory. The defendant saw this coming. Now, we know that it was heat exhaustion and heat stroke that killed Rory because Dr. McConaughey, the only medical doctor that you heard from today, told you this. You learned that cerebral edema and the muscle breakdown that was found during his autopsy is indicative of heat stroke, as were all the symptoms you heard about today. His pale skin, his weakness, his fatigue, the sweating, and finally the seizure. Now, you heard from his teammate Aubrey today, and he told you that he could see all of these signs visibly on Rory on September 7th. He could see that Rory was in pain and that he was struggling. He was worried about his best friend. You know who wasn't worried? The defendant. The defendant chose to ignore these signs, the signs that his student was struggling, and instead made him continue with those drills, those punishments. This wasn't cocaine that killed Rory Street. This was the defendant's drills and the defendant's actions. Now let's talk about the cocaine. The defendant wants to blame a nominal amount of cocaine that was found during an autopsy of Rory Street's body. You also heard the defendant try and blame the mother and his friends or anyone but himself, anything that takes a blame off of him. But that's not what happened here. You can't blame cocaine for the defendant ignoring safety regulations on the field. You can't blame cocaine for the defendant forcing players to run around in scorching heat doing back-to-back drills that he invented that very day. You can't blame cocaine for the defendant's failure to supervise Rory as he was ordered to perform these physical exercises back to back. You cannot blame cocaine for Rory's death. And all the defendant brought you today to substantiate their claim that it was cocaine that killed him was the word of a toxicologist, whose entire expert report you can read now essentially speculates that because there was cocaine in his system, that must have been the cause of death. But even their hired gun could only blame cocaine in part. He couldn't get past the heat stroke that the defendant caused by his actions. Instead, the only cardiologist and the person with a degree in biology and chemistry told you today that it was unequivocally not the cocaine that caused Rory's death. Your Honor, my client, Ms. Street, lost her son to heat stroke and heat exhaustion because of the defendant's negligence. The defendant saw this coming. The defendant prioritized discipline over safety and winning over health. And Rory Street was a victim of his need to win. Rory was the defendant's responsibility on that soccer field, and you must hold him accountable for his death. That's why, Your Honor, when using this verdict form that you created to determine negligence in this case, we ask that you answer question 1, did the negligence, if any, of the person named below proximately cause the accident in question? As to Reese Taylor, the defendant, the answer is yes. As to Rory Street, the answer is no. Reese Taylor, the defendant, is responsible for the death of his player. His drills, his decisions killed him. He failed to supervise Rory adequately, failed to provide enough breaks, failed to provide any water, and forced him to perform punishing and grueling drills, which resulted in the death of my client's son. Find the defendant liable for his death. Thank you.
Just so you're aware, for your rebuttal, you have 3 minutes and 58 seconds.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, defense counsel, are you ready to close?
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court. Counsel, at the beginning of this trial, I told you that the evidence will show you that no one saw this tragedy coming. Not a close friend, not a concerned mother, and certainly not Coach Taylor. No one could. See, now that you've seen all the evidence and you've heard the testimony, you know what I told you is true. And because of that, Coach Taylor's not responsible, not liable. Now, make no mistake, the death of Rory is truly a tragedy. No one should have to go through what Ms. Street has gone through. And today, no one blames Ms. Street for trying to find sense in this tragedy, for trying to answer why, But like I told you, the why is so much more complicated than pointing the finger at Coach Taylor. The why is the rolling boil of pressure that was looking for a place to escape in the life of a normal teenager, which ended in his tragic death due to cocaine. See, if any one of us knew then what we know now, we wouldn't be here. See, the plaintiff is held to the standards as if we're under the same roof, a preponderance of the evidence. And they call it a burden because it's heavy. See, she had to prove that Coach Taylor failed to act within ordinary care and was the proximate cause of this tragic accident that brings us here today. And it should be clear to you, Judge, that she failed to show that Coach Taylor acted with ordinary care, much less that Coach Taylor could have foreseen this tragedy. So we have to talk about why they failed to meet that burden. The first thing the plaintiff had to prove was that Coach Taylor failed to act or use ordinary care in his role as coach. And as the charge states, that means the degree of care would be used by a person of ordinary prudence in similar circumstances. So, in normal English, what that means is that what would a reasonable coach do in the same scenario? But the thing is, the plaintiff didn't give you an answer to that question. Sure, they gave you a few PowerPoints, but what we didn't hear is a single person testify as to what the standard was for Coach Taylor on September 7th and how he failed to act reasonably like any other coach would or wouldn't. See, what do we know of the kind of coach that Coach Taylor was? He certainly was tough on his students, his players. But he did try to act as a mentor towards them. He taught his students to push, to be better, to be tougher. And at times that came across in a pretty uncomfortable way. But there was no one more committed to helping his students improve, to helping them be the best version of themselves than Coach Taylor. So he didn't deviate in a fundamental way, which is what you're going to be asked to decide at the end of this trial. And how do we know that? We know that because he provided water during every hot practice. We heard that from Mr. Saracen. Now, yes, it was hot, but water bottles were there for anyone's access at any time during the break. Now, I understand that what they're saying is that Rory didn't have access to water, but that's not in fact true, because Saracen told us that no one ever stopped them from getting a water break. And Coach Taylor said the same thing. If Rory would have asked, of course he would have let him. So was that unreasonable? No. What would be unreasonable for a coach? See, what would be unreasonable would be withholding water, refusing to take breaks. But did we hear any of that? No, of course not. Not even a hint of that. So did Coach Taylor fail to use ordinary care as a reasonable coach? No. But that's not all, because we have to start to think about, they were practicing in the heat in the afternoon, and Waco's heat, as we've heard, is just absolutely, miserable, 105 degrees. But the plaintiffs didn't bring you evidence to support that fact was unreasonable. Because to be clear, this is a sport we play every year. Soccer season starts at the end of the summer. And as we sit here in our conditioned rooms, it's pretty hard to imagine running, sprinting outside in 105-degree heat. But this is what these kids were used to. This is what these kids had to get used to in order to play well, in order to win games. So was it unreasonable to make them practice in this heat with water, with the ability to stop as needed? No, it wasn't. Because that's what you have to do to make a good soccer team. And I understand, just like I told you at the beginning of this case, you might not like Coach Taylor. And as he was testifying today, he wasn't the most likable. I'll be honest about that. But the plaintiff is asking you to hold his discipline and asking you to say that the discipline is what defines this deviation from ordinary care. They made up a lot about this they talked a lot about this Burma Road and the slide tackling drill. So we've got to talk about those in part. You see, they said that that's had to be where Coach deviated. But what did the evidence show? The evidence showed that Burma Road had been around for as long as Coach knew how to play soccer. This is a generational conditioning drill passed on from soccer team to soccer team at Waco High. It's ordinary. It's something that all the soccer players have been through. It's something that Rory's mother even had been through. So that's not unreasonable. And while it might seem a bit extreme, it's ordinary for Waco High School. So what about that slide tackling drill? See, it's definitely the first time they've run it there. That's no question. But we have to consider what we heard. See, Mr. Saracen told us that slide tackling is part of the game. We heard that from Coach too. That sure, it's physical. Sure, there's contact. But you have to know how to do it, because if you don't know how to do it during a game, there can be penalties. It can cost you the game. But it's not unusually dangerous. We did hear that. And as we know, Rory wasn't injured from the slide tackling. You'll get the opportunity to see the autopsy report. And what you won't see is that he had any injuries consistent with bruising as a result of slide tackling. So when you're asked that first question of did he deviate from the ordinary care of a reasonable coach? The answer is no. But I can understand how that might not sit well with you. I mean, I understand how you can look at this conduct and think, he might have gone too far, and that's okay, we get that. But the plaintiff was never going to be able to prove that this was foreseeable, was never going to be able to show you that Coach Taylor could see that coming. So that's why we have to talk about why Coach Taylor wasn't the proximate cause of Rory's death. See, no one saw this tragedy coming. Not Coach Taylor, not a concerned close friend, and not a mother. And how do we know that? Because the science tells us that as well. See, heat exhaustion is certainly something that's common, certainly something that a kid out on a field could experience, but it's not fatal. See, when you go back in the jury room, we provided you with a scientific treatise. And what it says is that heat exhaustion rarely causes death, that it only causes death within about 3 to 5 cases. But when something else is involved, when a controlled substance is added into the mix, well, that's when it starts getting deadly. That's when that risk, the health risk, takes a massive jump. So it's the drugs that exacerbated the heat. But we have to break that down even further, because Coach Taylor had no idea that Rory was taking drugs. So in Coach Taylor's mind, you have to look at this. Of course, he was pushing Rory hard. But according to the science, the worst that could happen, there's only 3% to 5% risk of fatality. So he thought he was just pushing, his student a little bit harder. He had no idea about the drugs that were in Rory's body. So did Coach Taylor know? No. Did Rory's mother know? No. Did his closest friend know about these drugs? No. You see, we only have one silent witness in this case to these grim facts that cocaine might have been involved, and that's the toxicology report. See, and no one with a background in medicine has said that this test was inaccurate, so we have to trust it. So how could Coach Taylor ever even anticipate this? That Rory, his star player, one of his best ever, the guy he expected to get a scholarship to a school, the toughest one on the team, how could he ever expect his star player to goof off like that, to make that kind of mistake? And that's when we just come back to the ultimate fact that this wasn't foreseeable. He could have never known what was happening in Roy's mind, the pressure that was building, because no one was able to peel back the curtain to see how much pressure Rory was facing. Not his friend, not his mother, not his trainer, and not coach. You see, all Rory heard was just the beating drum of champion, scholarship, soccer, and the weight of the team's expectations for him, building the pressure. So that pressure mounted to a slow simmer, and it became a boil that we know now that Rory had to turn to cocaine. But no one blames this kid for trying to find comfort in the midst of all this chaos. At no point today do we suggest that Rory was a bad kid. All we're saying is that this was a natural circumstance. It was a natural thing that a teenager does. But it wasn't something anyone could have anticipated. See, You also heard the expert testify that Rory's death was caused, at least in part, by a mixture of that cocaine. So when you go back into the jury room, you have to take that into consideration. You have to boil down what Coach Taylor knew in those moments that he was pushing Rory and what facts he had no idea about. And when you do that, you'll see that no one knew that this tragedy was even possible. Not a friend, not a mother, and not Coach Taylor. Because of that, we ask that you find Coach Taylor not liable, because he's not liable for Rory's death.
Any rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor, may I proceed?
You may.
The defendant's whole case today is that no one saw this coming. But Your Honor, you heard testimony and you saw evidence today that the defendant saw this coming. He was in control of that soccer field, in control of those drills, and he could have helped Rory Street. He provided Rory Street with no breaks, no water, no shelter from the sun, and instead of helping him when he saw that he was visibly struggling, he pushed him harder to do more drills. Rory Street was visibly, physically breaking down in front of the defendant, and the defendant did nothing. The defendant literally saw this happening in front of his own eyes, and instead, he just kept on pushing Rory Street, pushing him until he died. The plaintiff has proven to you that the defendant had a duty today, a duty to protect its players' safety and its players' health. The duty that the defendant is under is not to make sure there's water around or to not withhold water. The duty is much greater than that. If he sees a player like Rory Street struggling, he has to intervene, check if he's okay, call a trainer over, something. Instead, the defendant saw his player collapse, out of breath, pale, and he decided to yank him up and make him keep on going, keep on getting tackled by the rest of the players in the team. That is a breach of the defendant's duty, and that breach caused my client's son to perish on September 7th. Now, you know it was the cause of his death because our expert told you this. He told you that Rory Street died because of heat exhaustion. And that cannot be disputed. Even the defendant's own expert witness cannot say with certainty that the cocaine killed Rory Street. He says in part it may have been caused by the nominal amount of cocaine in his system. But members of the jury, Your Honor, you know what killed Rory Street. The defendant's failure to protect his safety and his health resulted in his death. As such, we ask that you find the defendant liable for his death. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we've been asked, so the jurors are going to go ahead and fill out their comment cards, send them in, please, per the instructions we got yesterday on the call. We've been asked not to give feedback in order to keep the timing kind of rolling. I'd ask that nobody leave the call until I get the clear to release y'all. I will say thank you guys so much for the hard work you put into this, and thank you so much for your ability and interest and whatnot to improvise to what is a unique setup. And I will say you guys did very well kind of adjusting as necessary to this. So